new perspectives and gave me pause sometimes to challenge me to think about some assumptions or other experiences that I may have had in my life and to hear a different perspective. So I thought it was a really wonderful day, a lot of good discussions during the program as well as after dinner, during dinner. So I don't mean for this to be an insensitive question because I ask it as thinking more of myself actually with my late grandmother who was hard of hearing, because I was saying as an able person, thinking back to my first experiences to someone who was disabled. And what was that relationship like? How did that affect day-to-day living? I'm not actually sure what the correct question would be for someone who is disabled to say, what has your relationship been with others or with someone you may have met for the first time that had a different disability? I'm not really sure, so we can talk about that over the tea break. But the purpose for this was to introduce the fact that from childhood, I was aware that my grandmother couldn't hear well. And the reason for that was during World War II, she was one of the people called Rosie the Riveter in the US, and she worked in a factory that made the aircraft that the Australian Air Force, US Air Force, United Kingdom, all used. It was called the Flying Tiger, or P-40. But because of that loud manufacturing environment, and this was in Buffalo, New York, where I grew up, she became hard of hearing. So my recollections from childhood were that we would go visit Grandma, and in the 60s, it was a black and white television, and it was turned up so loud, and you were just wondering, why was it so loud in Grandma's house? Because she couldn't hear. And yet today, how she would have benefited and how we're all benefiting from captioning and subtitles in streaming media. And this is a screenshot that I have, an image from Disney Plus menu for audio descriptions and subtitles. And the commercial media and entertainment industry, we saw a talk yesterday about captioning. The commercial industry very much is using the W3C standard called time text markup language. And that is for captioning and subtitles. And this ensures that people with disabilities are able to see the captions and also the subtitles. So the European Broadcast Union is using it. It's being used in Japan and throughout the US. It also received an Emmy Award in 2016. That was our first Emmy Award. And that was quite a night. I actually had the pleasure of being there with the team to accept that on behalf of W3C. So interestingly, the media and entertainment industry was very advanced in adopting subtitles and captions. Way back in 1970, they started with analog, with EIA 608, and we actually have people still at W3C working on the TTML, time text markup language, who were working back in the 1970s and with these original standards. So it's pretty amazing, the history. And I had the chance to chat with one of these folks. And W3C also got involved pretty early. We were a little bit ahead of the curve looking at some of the web and television. And then later in the late 2000s, we actually got a very major initiative going on web and television in chartering more work. And in 2010, time text markup language became a recommendation. So the media industry recognized that they had customers for whom this was very important. And creatively, they also wanted to make sure they had control over the subtitles in different languages. So that was a driver for media and entertainment. Additionally, there are many governments that are mandating now for captioning and for accessible media. So in Australia, this is interesting. It was the communications group, but I was looking again to verify this just 2 days ago, and that ministry has now been folded effective the 1st of February into the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, and Communications. That's a mouthful. But anyway, they're the ones that are overseeing this. Canada also very active. We have Access Media is an organization there that is involved in W3C, European Union, and they do have EU, but also country by country regulations, and in the United States, the FCC, Federal Communications, oversees this. So this is an area that's quite robust. It is law, and it is being followed quite well, and so that's good. So we'll +1 to media and entertainment industry for accessibility. There we go. So let's look at a few different industries. We're going to take a look at digital publishing, healthcare, automotive transportation, and gaming immersive web, or WebXR, virtual reality. Here we go. So at W3C, we have many groups, a very robust publishing activity. And there are 4 different types of groups at W3C. Working groups are the ones that do the standards work. Interest groups do requirements and use cases. Business groups do more strategy and oversight and industry input and direction. And then community groups do more technical pre-standard specification work. And so the publishing industry is a number of these types of groups. The publishing industry has seen the opportunity to use the open web platform and increasingly publish materials we're seeing not only in the packaged formats, but also more and more online in different industries, particularly in scholarly publishing, and the manga is moving in that direction as well. So eBooks, they are based on EPUB 3.2 now. That is the current specification. It is not a W3C standard. EPUB originally came to us from the International Digital Publishing Forum, which merged with W3C several years ago. But we have a very robust group, community group, that has been continuing to develop EPUB 3.2 and ensure that it meets all of the current accessibility requirements. And this group, together with the business group, did fundraising, a lot of crowdsourced fundraising, to create an EPUB checker tool. So if you're not familiar with that, please check it out. The numbering isn't the same, so it's EPUB 3.2 is the EPUB specification, but the EPUB checker tool is 4.2.2, so it's a little different. But the actual check is actually based on also accessibility conformance testing. In addition, the working group, which is doing standards, has a manifest for publishing, and they are very focused on audiobooks because there has not been good standardization in audiobooks, and particularly around accessibility. So they are adding features, and they're at candidate recommendation. It's being implemented and tested now, and they've added alt tags to describe images in audiobooks, adding hooks for synchronized media and table of contents, again, just to have a much richer experience when listening to audiobooks. And this is just a screen grab that shows some of the more of the detail. Now, I have many links embedded in this presentation, so I encourage you to take a look afterwards. It will be available, and explore some of these areas. And just this week, on Monday, the Publishing Business Group put out a survey. They would very much love to have feedback from Australia, and I said, I will put that in the presentation. So the link here is for SurveyMonkey. It just opened, and they would like to have feedback. Not only there will be accessibility areas, but a lot of questions about the future of publishing and the roadmap, and where they think they would like input on where the publishing industry would like to go with the web. So I encourage you to do that. So publishing, we'll give them a thumbs up also, doing good work, real concrete work, very identifiable, real specifications coming out in that area. So healthcare, big, big area, big industry, both here in Australia and in the United States. We tend to have more of a private system. We do a public for certain categories, over 65, and also for people who may not be able to afford health care. So we have different programs, but the majority of the US market is a private system. I was just speaking with someone earlier from HBF who said you're about 30% private here and also public. So that was helpful. And the Australia government has set a mandate that says, yes, they want to ensure it's sort of, maybe it's not a mandate, maybe it's more of a statement that says, yes, we want to make sure services are accessible. And it states that they are designing websites to be based on WCAG 2.0, level AA. But we haven't seen a lot of that in practice yet. So some sites are doing better than others. And also in the US, we do have these regulations, Americans for Disabilities Act. It's improving, but there's still a ways to go in healthcare to make sure those websites are accessible. And the law is one way, certainly, but we're seeing increased customer expectations, really expecting that a low vision or high contrast or mobile use, people want to be able to have accessible access to information as they should. There's new inputs from medical devices. That is not yet being addressed. That's a whole new frontier area in healthcare and any IoT devices. So that's an opportunity area. Perhaps there could be, if there's interest in that, people could form a community group and start looking into that. Telemedicine applications, assistive technologies, et cetera. And we do see some increase in hiring in healthcare, so that's good. There's a very large private healthcare organization in the US that's in the process of joining W3C, so that's encouraging. We'll hope to get more healthcare perspectives, but we really would like to see more done in this area. And of course, there are threats of lawsuits, not just in healthcare, but generally. The US tends to be a more litigious society, and unfortunately, we're seeing an increase in lawsuits in the US because some industries are just not getting the concept. They're just not understanding the importance of accessibility, and that's unfortunate. Of course, everyone knows the high-profile case of the Sydney 2000 Olympics here that did have a legal path as opposed to a more mediated path, which I understand is part of your legal system to start first. It's rare that you have this type of a high-profile lawsuit. But very recently, and maybe some of you have heard about this as well, is the Domino's Pizza case. And fortunately, the courts held, it got denied at the Supreme Court, our ultimate court. It stayed in the Ninth Circuit. And they ruled, sorry, Domino's, you need to make that website accessible. And everyone was very happy for that ruling. But there are a lot of retailers who are not getting the message yet either, and so W3C is in the process of forming a merchant business group, and that will be a discussion forum for retailers as well as other folks in the retail system, issuers and other people that are part of that community, so that we can help educate them and help. It's a lighter way to get involved in W3C, non-technical path. And actually, my manager and a couple other colleagues are at the Merchant Advisory Group Conference this week in Atlanta, discussing the formation of this group and encouraging that. So if you have know people in the retail sector, please let them know that we have a new on-ramp for their voice and learning about not only accessibility, but payments and other areas that are interesting for merchants. Oops, there we go. So another industry that is just beginning to look at the accessibility implications is automotive and transportation. And W3C has an automotive and transportation business group, and they are just starting to look at this and in dialogue with people who are developing ontologies for the accessibility community, particularly around public transportation access and also first responder, 000 type responders for building descriptions, curb cuts, that type of thing. So we held a workshop. One of the things W3C does before initiating new work is to bring a community together around topics, presentations, papers, much like we're doing here. We had one on automotive and transportation data, and they started to look at some of the implications of data privacy, for accessibility, which is good. It's just starting the conversation. And one example from the workshop was a really good presentation from the University of Toronto in Canada. And their enterprise integration lab is very far along in developing new ontologies around accessible vehicles, et cetera. So this is a map on this next slide of the city of Toronto. And the goal is not only accessibility, but also a roadmap for 30 years out. What will the transportation infrastructure need, environmental impacts, et cetera. But what they have done is they now have very robust, very descriptive ontologies for wheelchair boarding or as I said before, what are the building requirements. It will be open source. It is available now. It's not fully deployed, but you can take a look, and our goal is to bring these conversations into the automotive and transportation business group discussions. So again, moving, they're getting a thumbs up for moving in the right direction, but not as far along as some of the other industries that we've seen. Next, I'd like to talk briefly about gaming and the immersive web. So accessibility is interesting in the gaming because so many of the games that people know about are not on the web. There are casual games that are on the web. You might play casual games on Facebook, for example, but many of the games are still console-based, and they have not made them all very accessible. And so we're encouraging that community to look at WCAG almost as a software solution and bring that in. So we held a workshop last year in Seattle where we had many of the major large gaming players present and looking at some of these challenges for gaming. So there were a couple of presentations that were quite interesting that I wanted to call out. And again, all of this is available online. The presentations are available if you'd like to go back and take a look if gaming is interesting for you. There was a presentation from the American Psychological Association, particularly around device and game controllers. And the position paper suggested that there really needs to be an accessibility mode set in for these devices, and it was pretty well received. And the gentleman who was presenting told the story of someone who was a very avid gamer, but recently had become quite physically disabled and was really suffering, I think, in a depression. And they were able to work with this gentleman and bring in more accessible tools for him so that he could be gaming again, and it just opened his life back up again. And gaming has the sort of instant gratification and satisfaction of success, and it really was a wonderful presentation, so I would encourage you to take a look at that. Also, Matthew Atkinson described more about adaptive accessibility needs in his presentation, so these are things we're looking at. Also in Seattle, we were back there just last November for another workshop bringing the accessibility community together with the immersive web, which we're WebXR for augmented, virtual, and what's the other one? No, I can't remember. It's an M. Mixed, thank you, mixed reality. But we're just calling it XR. So for auditory, there were several findings there, reviewing some of the immersive captions, and there's actually a community group looking at captions, so encourage you to check that out. Those community groups, as I said, are free, so they're available for you. Looking again at assistive technologies with XR, and we're proposing continued coordination. It hasn't risen yet to the standards track. We're not sure yet. We're still exploring this area. But there is another inclusive design for immersive web community group, so do check that out as well. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is at W3C, one of the staff members has been very active with this community and liaising with another working group that is the Accessible Platform Architecture Working Group, and they actually have just published, and I would really love for you to take a look and provide public feedback. There's a shout out for that as well, for public comments on this first editor's draft. So at W3C, we have various stages involved in a recommendation before it becomes a standard, and so a first editor's draft or a first public working draft is that first stage to really rally the community and say, hey, we're doing something here. take a look, and we'd love to have some of your feedback on that. Also at this workshop in Seattle, we had presentations from one researcher who is at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. Her name is Wendy Daniels. She herself happens to be deaf, and I had a wonderful conversation, follow-up conversation with her, where she went into much more detail about the research she was doing with young people. They run a camp for deaf children in the summer, and she is working with the XR glasses and trying to build in a real-time captioning experience in the glasses so that they don't have to be paying attention to an interpreter. They can be looking at the museum exhibit and then seeing, since they don't have the hearing available to them, to actually have the captioning and not miss anything and be able to look at the planetarium and see the stars and then in real time have the descriptions. They're coming along pretty well. They're having a second camp this summer. So we're following this work quite with a lot of interest. And I have a link to her research paper there. Also at Monash University in Melbourne, a gentleman, Chitai Ganku, is doing research for blind people with technologies, hardware and software technologies for information anywhere for AR, VR. So I wasn't able to have a follow-up with him. I'm hoping to do that while I'm here in country. So just to wrap up, I think we can feel pretty good that we're seeing some progress with industries getting and paying attention to accessibility. Yes, there's more work to do, certainly, and the panel yesterday that lost, sorry, there is a lot more work to do with accessibility. So those of you who weren't here, there was a panel of a debate whether or not accessibility would continue or if there was no need for it. There's certainly a very big need in many, many industries. But this was just a quick snapshot to show you some of those industries. And I'd like to particularly call out many of the folks from the accessibility community in Australia. So there are a number of companies listed here on this slide. I won't read them all out here. But we're very grateful for your participation and want to encourage so many more of you. There are many on-ramps to W3C. You don't have to always be paying the full membership. That does, if you want to be in a working group and contribute to the technical specifications, and yes, that is a requirement. That is our model. But we certainly welcome much more participation. So now I want to just transition a little bit. I think I have a little bit more time. Okay. And probably go fairly quickly because you can go back through some of these slides later, just to explain a little more about the Web Accessibility Initiative at W3C. It has been a core pillar at W3C for many, many years, and it's multi-stakeholder. We operate by consensus, we do get community input, and we use a very open process. So one of the things that has changed, as I think everyone in this room knows very well, I'll go quickly through these, oops, oh, there, I didn't lose it, is the number of disability areas that we are improving access for on the web, from vision and hearing to age to neurological. And as folks know, with some of the new work really focused on mobile, low vision, and cognitive. So that is area that is new, and we'll hopefully see more standards work in that. So this is a list of some of the new things. WCAG 2.1 was completed in June of 2018. We have the silver work underway, and we'll be seeing a lot more new features coming through that work. Looking more at audio and video things, translating, a lot more translations are happening around the world so that people who are non-English speakers are able to access the standards. So just a lot of great work is going on in that area. In the content area, again, many improvements. I mentioned mobile, low vision, and cognitive. And then in terms of the evaluation, the tools, authoring tool and accessibility guidelines, a lot of work continuing here with ATAG, browser media mobile, user agent accessibility guidelines work is continuing. And then what we call FAST, the Framework for Accessible Specification of Technology. Again, guidance on how to using these specifications. And of course, ARIA, providing more capabilities. And that ARIA 1.2 was completed in 2017. Now they're working on accessibility API mappings. More conformance testing. Testing rules 1.0. It's almost at recommendation. And ACT Rules Community Group is developing a set of 70 rules through a project that was funded by the European Commission. So more work in that area. And as I mentioned before, the publishing community was able to use the ACT tools in building that EPUB checker. So many resources, as you know, on the W3C Accessibility website. Please continue to check that out, and many groups. And also, please talk to me afterwards. Happy to arrange briefings, introduce you to people in the community. And we're very excited that just a couple weeks ago, for the first time, W3C has launched an accessibility online course. Now, this is a free course on W3CX, which is the edX platform, a MOOC, and it's a wonderful course that is aimed not necessarily at the practitioners in this room, but at your clients and at your colleagues who need to know more about accessibility and why it's so important. And again, a fabulous shout out to the Australian accessibility community, because 2 companies were invited to prepare modules for this course. So Vivian Conway, WebKey IT, prepared the business case module, and Andrew Arch and Sarah Poulos and Topia prepared the module on getting started with accessibility in your organization. There are 5 or 6 modules, I think. So also, I just checked these stats yesterday with my colleague, Marie-Claire Forg, who oversees this with Shadi Abu Zahara. And from Australia, we already have 365 people enrolled and getting wonderful feedback. People are very excited about this course. So spread the word. It's a free course online. So in summary, we started 50 years ago thinking about my childhood with my grandmother and the fact that disabilities weren't that well understood, and the web, of course, didn't even exist. But fast forward today, we are encouraged to see that awareness is increasing. There's much more innovation because of the standards work that's being done and the work of folks like you who are really dedicated and committed to advancing accessibility. And so we really would like to say thank you and encourage continued participation and dialogue. And thank you so much for having me today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. Now, Karen, you will be here for the rest of the conference, I believe? All right. But hate you having to have travelled all this distance and not have lots and lots more questions for people. So find Karen out during the breaks, morning tea, afternoon tea and lunch, of course, and I'm sure she'll answer all of your queries and get you registered with them as well. We just have a short break here while we swap over presenters. So we're moving on to Dr. Scott Hollier is next, I believe. I'm looking at Scott. Are you nodding? That's good. And we just call upon Mitch. So if you'd just like to stand up, stretch your legs for just a couple of moments, and we'll get started again shortly.
Okay, I've got the HDMI.
Taking that one down, Mitch. What are we doing just on top?
Did you want to hold it during the presentation?
Yeah, I'll just hold it during the presentation. That's easy enough. And whereabouts is the mic? Is that
Mic
sort
is
of
just in front,
around
yep,
there?
about chest height.
All right, so about here?
Yep, I'll
Cool.
just get that sort of adjusted a bit for you.
No worries.
There you go. Sorry, if you could just grab this, just run kind of, just moving over.
Sure. No worries.
Thank you.
Ooh. Yeah. Hang on. It's not letting me flick anymore.
Excellent.
Hang on.
Okay, well, this...
Sorry.
No,
seems to have killed my movement. Hang on. Sorry, just a tick. I can't flick through my slides. No, it's just normally I can move. Yeah, it's not swiping for some reason.
Just while we're waiting, is anyone missing a blue scarf by any chance? Giselle, okay, no worries. We won't auction it off. It's been found. We'll get it to you during the break, okay?
Yeah, David, I'm going to need a minute, I think. Okay, can I borrow you for a tick? Okay, can you just relaunch the...
Relaunch the presentation?
Slide from beginning.
Yeah, slide number 1.
And
It's on there now. And from the beginning?
from the beginning, see if it'll let me do it.
Oh, hang on, it's brought up a security alert.
Yeah.
We'll just hit the cancel on that, shall we?
I don't know what's
Or
doing.
do you want it as an
No,
okay?
no, that's all right. Oh, okay, it's fine. Don't know what's going on there.
All right, I think we're up.
Hey, that's better.
All right, so you good?
I think we are. Cool.
Okay, we are ready. We didn't do our technology prayer, that's why it's taken a little bit longer. Now, this is a good segue because you heard Karen talk very briefly about XR technologies, and I'm really keen to hear what Scott's got to say in terms of this area, being a bit of a AR, VR, XR, MR nut. Dr. Scott Hollier is here today to talk about, now correct me if I've got this wrong, XR user requirements, W3C work on mixed reality accessibility.
That's
Over to Dr. Scott
No
Hollier.
worries. Thanks very much, David. Good morning, everyone, and it is wonderful to be here at Aussie WAI and to have Aussie WAI in Perth. So thank you, everyone, for coming over. It's a truly wonderful thing to have everyone here. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about, as David said, the XR user requirements, explaining a bit about the W3C work in the accessible platform architecture, as Karen was saying. And yes, the timing is perfect because when I put in this presentation, I was hoping that, something's happened. There we go. It's good technology day today. Yeah, I was hoping to have the chance to share this with you, and you know, a lot of the call for consensus and approvals just went through last week, so the timing's been really good. Just for people who don't know me, I'm Digital Access Specialist.